This is what a year of slow stitching looks like. Countless hours devoted to color, texture, and a love of stitching has meant 22 videos of diverse and colorful projects. Let's go through them one by one and see all the possibilities with fabric, floss, and thread. The description box will have a link to every project mentioned. Let's get started. First up is the mini swan. At about 2 inches square, this swan was stitched on a simple background with an emphasis on stitch to create the water and the marsh. Next up was a tutorial on how to get started in slow stitching. There were ideas on the types of stitching you can do on either a fabric collage or on a single piece of fabric. Some suggestions about needles and thread, and a few methods for creating slow stitches. I stitched a junco bird with a focus on adding texture with layers of stitching. There was a beginner tutorial on how to create a fabric collage, where I discussed the steps in building a fabric collage, securing it in place, and a method for choosing floss to complement your collage. Working small again, I created several brooches, following different methods including fabric collage, using templates, stuffing, and layers of stitch to achieve different effects. I challenged myself to use just one stitch, the straight stitch, to create a stitched piece with lots of interest. I answered the top 3 questions that I get about slow stitching, showing the tools and materials I use, and giving some ideas about what can be made from your slow stitching. The next challenge was to use just one color to stitch a piece. I created 3 squares, one stitched in white, one in red, and one in black. And then I joined them together to wrap a jar for storing stitching supplies. And then it was time to dive into crazy quilting and stitch a scroll inspired by this eclectic Victorian stitch method. I took it step by step, creating a collage, adding trims and lace, adding a bird, and so many different kinds of stitching. So fun. I made another scroll and added lettering, the word piece, and I showed how to join pieces together to make an ongoing scroll project. I pulled out my watercolors and I painted onto fabric, and then I stitched abstract shapes, adding layer upon layer of stitch and texture. Inspired by Vincent van Gogh, I stitched in blues and gold, creating a starry night and an abstract cafe scene. This was inspired by a partnership with Diamond Art Club, where I made my first diamond art project, and it was based on one of Van Gogh's paintings. I stitched a black-capped chickadee bird. I added a kilt pin to the top and I turned it into a brooch that I pinned onto my jean jacket. Looking for an easy, relaxing project for beginners, I created squares, stitching in one color on a solid fabric. I took those squares and I stitched them together, creating a vibrant patchwork. Then I wanted to stitch a landscape, so I used a repeating pattern and I stitched in layers. And then I decided to add some scale and a point of interest, so I added a tree. To use up some scraps of double gauze fabric, I stitched a quilt as you go style and made squares, and I used the backing as the binding. And then I stitched 4 of them together to make a bag. Turning to the versatile rectangle, I created a collage, added layers of stitching, even more collage, slow stitching lines, and then a colorful binding. There were multiple options, but I decided to turn this into a needlebook. I came back to the stitch scroll and thought about the scroll as a stitch journal or a diary, a place to try out ideas, stitches, and colors. I ended up with 2 very different scrolls, which gave me even more ideas for future projects. I made a drawstring bag, but this time I took my drawstring project to the next level by using a template and adding a mushroom to the front and to the back. A colorful drawstring brought the whole thing together beautifully. I brought out 3 completed projects that still needed a backing, and I gave each one a slightly different type of backing that suited the type of project that it was, and it felt good to have those pieces complete. And finally, I decided to have some childlike fun and stitch a penguin. I opted to use 2 types of lace for the penguin body, which meant the project had a fun, unique look, and it came together quickly. So that's my year in Stitch. Did you follow along and make any of your own? I have links to all the projects in the description if you'd like to take a look and see them for the first time, or to pop in for a rewatch. If you haven't already, consider hitting the subscribe button and giving this video a like. Subscribing means you'll be notified when I upload a new video, and a like helps the algorithm to put my videos in front of more people who might enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining me this year and stitching along. I hope you found some ideas and inspiration for your stitching projects, and I promise there's even more color and texture and stitch in store for the new year. Until next time, happy stitching.